the moment the affirmation feels like you're lying. You're looking in the mirror, you're saying the words, and yet something underneath goes, nope. So what's with that? That's what we're unpacking today. Welcome to Human Evolution, the podcast where growth gets real, patterns get exposed, and things start to look a little different. I'm Jodie Thaler, integrative neuroregulation coach and the founder of Mind Drop. This is where we have the conversations that don't always get said out loud, unpacking emotional regulation, neuroscience, and the patterns shaping how you think, feel, and show up in the world, and what it really takes to change. For the self-aware, heart-led humans and high performers who are done running on autopilot and ready to live life on purpose. Let's go. So let's start with the distinction that most people skip past. Self-esteem and self-worth, because they are not the same thing. Self-esteem is how you feel about your skills, your performance, how you look, what you've achieved. It moves and fluctuates. It can go up when you nail the presentation or someone tells you that you look amazing. But it can drop when the feedback stings or you've had a really big week. Self-esteem is tied to outcomes. So it's often at the mercy of those exact outcomes. Self-worth is different. It's the sense that you have value simply because you exist, not because of what you produce or how useful you've been or how little you've needed for anybody for that matter. It's meant to be stable and unconditional. Here's a really simple way to kind of tell the difference. So self-esteem answers the question, how am I doing? Self-worth answers a completely different question. What am I worth regardless of how I'm doing? One you can see is about performance and the other is about identity. And the reason they get so tangled up is that when self-worth is kind of shaky, self-esteem starts doing a job it kind of wasn't meant to do. It wasn't built for. And that's propping up the whole structure of you. So let's break this down into a couple of examples. I want you to picture two people getting the same piece of hard feedback on a project. Okay, so one person has a reasonably solid sense of self-worth. The feedback stings a little bit. They may even feel embarrassed for a little while, maybe an afternoon, but nothing about who they are is actually on the line. They can look at the feedback, they can take what's useful, and they move on. Whereas the second person's self-worth has always been more what we call contingent. So this means it's tied to performing well. So for them, the same feedback does something completely different. It stops being about the one thing that went wrong and turns into evidence about who they are as a person. Same input, completely different nervous system response. Because one person's identity was riding on the outcome and the other's wasn't. Now let's flip the scenario. We've got the same two people, and this time something goes really, really well at work, like say it's a big win. For the person with contingent worth, remember that's the one that can be a little bit shaky and dependent on something, that win does more than just feel good. It functions like relief, temporarily propping something up that's usually shaky, which is exactly why the good feeling doesn't actually last. It was never building anything, it was borrowed. For the person with more of a solid sense of self-worth, the win still feels great, but it's an additive. It just adds to a sense of value that was already stable and there to begin with, rather than actually holding it up. This is why what you fundamentally, unconsciously believe about yourself matters so much. And this is exactly where the neuroscience comes in. This is something that I find that trips a lot of people up. People that are doing the work, whether it's like self-development, therapy, journaling, or affirmations, it's actually self-esteem work. It's a more sophisticated way of earning the feeling, like the feeling of feeling good, but it's still conditional. Crocker and Wolfe's research out of the University of Michigan is worth having a bit of a chat about, but I feel that it needs a quick translation first. So their theory is called contingencies of self-worth. Self-worth and self-esteem often get used almost interchangeably, which seeps out into pop culture as well. But this is different to the distinction that we're drawing today. What they are actually describing is the conditional kind, which is more of what we're calling self-esteem here. Their finding is that self-esteem rises and falls depending on where someone staked their sense of value. Remember, value equals their sense of self-worth. So whether that be on achievement, approval, appearance, performance, we talked about that before. The higher the stakes, though, in one area, the more destabilizing a failure there becomes. So if your sense of value or your sense of self-worth is riding on your work and something goes wrong at work, that crash isn't just a mere disappointment. It can actually feel existential. Think about if you've known anyone who's ever lost their job and it's been in a certain career that they've been working on and now they don't know who they are anymore. And that existential feeling, there's a reason for that of what's going on under the hood. And it's the part why these two kind of get tangled up so much. So your prefrontal cortex, which is what we talk about as the CEO, handles self-reflection and self-appraisal. Your hippocampus builds your autobiographical narrative. And this is the story of who you are and what you're worth. And that's where self-worth beliefs actually get filed as identity, not performance. Self-esteem has its own separate footprint in the brain. A 2014 neuroimaging study by Agroskin and colleagues, looking specifically at self-esteem, found that people with higher self-esteem had measurably more grey matter in the ACC and the right prefrontal cortex regions, which are tied to stress regulation and holding steady under pressure. People with lower self-esteem had less. And this is why this is interesting, because self-esteem is a real physical pattern in the brain. That's exactly why it's so easy to mistake building self-esteem for building self-worth. Both show up structurally. They're not the same structure though, and they're definitely not doing the same job. And structural patterns, whichever one we're talking about here, come from experience, which means they can also change through experience. So back to the mirror. You're there, you're looking at yourself and you say the affirmation. And something underneath you goes, nah. Not happening. I call BS. This is also why the typical way sometimes of how people teach manifestation doesn't work. So the affirmation lands at your conscious language-based part of your brain. It's the CEO. And the CEO is what we want. Like we are consciously deciding what we want, and therefore we're saying it. We're like, hey, we want this. We want to feel this way. Self-worth beliefs don't live in our conscious thought patterns. They live in the operating system. It's the deeper layer of beliefs that's running underneath everything. And it's doing a constant background check. So if the operating system is still running an old code, a code being like worth comes from what I produce or from how little I need, then the new statement hits, the new affirmation that you say comes on board, and then the OS, the operating system, flags it immediately and goes, nah, conflict detected straight away each and every time. And that's why it feels like you're lying to yourself. The affirmation reaches your language layer, like your CEO, but the operating system decides that it's fake news. And because the operating system sits below the language, below conscious reasoning, you can't logic your way past it. The caveat to this is for affirmations to truly work, because they can, you must say them with enough repetition and enough emotion, consistently enough for a long enough period of time to rewrite the belief underneath it, for the brain to actually start accepting it. There are other ways as well that we approach this that are even more effective than doing this, because it would take you quite some time to be able to get an affirmation to truly become a belief that doesn't cause this conflict underneath, if that's what you're having. Now, you might say an affirmation and it lands because your belief underneath it accepts it. And that's fine. That'll work. That's no problems at all. It's a slightly different thing that we're talking about here. So if affirmations don't easily reach the operating system, what does? How do we do it? How do we change our beliefs? How do we build our self-worth? There's a sequence. And it's skipping these steps, which is why most self-worth work just doesn't stick. First, what we want to do is we need the emotional charge to be removed. So the old belief, I have to earn my place, it isn't just a thought, it's a felt, lived experience, usually with some threat energy attached to it. So that charge is what's keeping it alive. It's where the body-based work isn't just a nice add-on, it's actually the mechanism that we need to do. So research by Church and colleagues, replicated again by Stapleton's team, Dr. Peter Stapleton here in Australia, found that a single session of EFT tapping produced a significant drop in cortisol, amongst other things, which, as we know, cortisol is the primary stress hormone. So if we can reduce the charge and we can change our physiology, then we will have less resistance. And less resistance means the operating system is more open to receiving something different. So second step, your nervous system has to actually be regulated enough to receive it. So what Stephen Porges calls the ventral vagal state. It's the state of genuine safety and connection. It's the state that new beliefs can actually be received in. It's extremely difficult to rewire self-worth from a dysregulated nervous system. Ask me how, I know. You can understand something completely and still have it bounce off of it because understanding alone doesn't get past the guard dog. Remember, that's your amygdala, your threat detection system, right? When your body is still running a threat response, nothing gets through. The third step is that new belief gets introduced in that regulated state. It's not talked into a defended mind. We offer it into an open mind. And that's the difference between saying, I am enough at your most anxious moment of the day when you are clearly not going to believe it, and the same words actually being accepted after your nervous system has actually settled. We also use language in here as well to help. So if something that you're saying doesn't feel true, if you say, I am enough, and that doesn't feel true to you, we can use language, something like, I am learning to accept that I am enough, or I am open to the possibility that I am enough. And just that shift in language can be enough when you are in a regulated state to allow that belief to start to form. And the fourth step, this is the part that is really important. It's that lived experience has to provide the evidence. This is our integration. The operating system doesn't just update from one well-timed sentence, but it updates through repetition. What you allow, what you ask for, that moment that you pause before the automatic yes, all this little skill building that we do. The moment that you hold that boundary and the world doesn't come to a complete end and crash. Each one of these experiences is your nervous system now collecting new information or new data that contradicts the old programming. None of this happens instantly. It's something that you practice and build upon rather than just understand. It is skill building. It's psychoeducation. It is actually doing something in the modalities that work that shift this type of thing and start building that self-worth from the inside out. However, it doesn't take forever either when you take a multi-level approach. This is exactly why I created the neuroregulation method after finally experiencing this for myself. It was like finally finding the right key to the door that was locked and not willing to budge by my thousands of attempts of banging on it and pulling on the handle. You see, most approaches only ever touch one layer, maybe two, right? It could be like the CEO layer through therapy and journaling, or the apps layer through somatic work on its own, or even the operating system through mindset work that never gets past the actual belief. I've met Inner Spark members who have tried all of that separately for years and shifted more in a mere few months than a decade of the other stuff combined that they've tried. And that's because the neuroregulation method is designed to work across all four layers instead of leaving it to one approach to do the whole entire thing. It's the same framework underneath every coaching program that I've built. It's why the people that I work with are able to regulate their nervous system, expand their capacity, ignite that spark that's been sitting underneath the surface for so long, and actually build the life and business that they've been stuck circling around for years. So as we wrap up today's episode, self-worth is the sense that you have value simply because you exist. And you do, my friend. Not because of what you produce or how useful you've been. It gets built the same way most things in your nervous system get built, through repetition, in the right sequence, with the right regulation. Clear the charge, holding the old belief in place. Regulate the nervous system so it's actually able to receive something new and that there's safety involved. Introduce the belief there in that regulated state and back it with lived experience integration over and over until your body has enough proof to actually hold it. And it doesn't take as long as you think. Self-worth lives in your operating system. It's part of your identity, which is why building it takes a little more than better thinking or mindset tricks. It takes working with the actual layers where the belief gets stored, and you've got to go through all the layers to get there. Coming up next, we're going to talk about what the word regulation actually means. We're going to talk about what it looks like in your body and how you know you have it and when you don't. We'll see you there. Hey, my beautiful friend. Thanks for hanging out and listening to today's episode. If you want to keep the momentum going, head over to the vault at minddrophq.com/podcast. It's where all the tools, resources, and gold from the show are kept, so your growth doesn't stop when the episode ends. If this episode sparks something in you, share it with a friend or someone who needs to hear this. The more people having these conversations, the bigger the ripple we create. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. It really means the world. Until next time, keep being your gorgeous, unstoppable self.